tardes. Hello. Welcome to this press conference following the 14th meeting of the Foreign Ministers of Asia-Europe meeting, ASEM. High Representative Vice President Josep Borrell will present you the outcome of the meeting, and then the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Singapore, as coordinator for ASEAN, will also say a few words, and we will then take your questions. High Representative, please.
Thank to all of you. We would like to thank the government of Spain on behalf of the European Union for hosting in this beautiful palace that belongs to the national heritage, national Spanish heritage. I also want to thank His Majesty the King for allowing us to use this beautiful place and for the excellent job on organizing this important ministerial meeting that has been fruitful and I hope open the door for a future cooperation. The European Union attaches a great importance to its partnership with Asia. We have scaled up our cooperation in and with Asian partners in recent years, developing a stronger political ties and a deeper security engagement. That so many Asian partners came to Madrid today show us that partnership is also important for them. And at a time of many changes in the international landscape, we need each other and we need to work more closely together today more than ever. It's my first meeting, my first international conference as High Representative for Security and Foreign Policy of the European Union. And I am glad to do it here with ASEM, which is a unique platform for European and Asian partners for dialogue and engaging in common challenges. Just think about that we together represent 55% of global trade, 60% of global population, 65% of global GDP. 2/3 of the world revenue is being generated in our countries. These are very impressive numbers and show that we together should be able to make a global difference. Our theme, the theme we choose for the conference, Asia and Europe together for an effective multilateralism, shows very well this will. I've been drafting together with all the colleagues a, let's say, German statement, but it has been agreed, I can say, by all of us, although everybody would have liked to say things in a different way in one point or another. But I think that this statement is a good balance of our work. We have been talking about many subjects, and why not, and especially for sure about climate change. Today in Spain is an important day also because we have been hosting the last conference of climate change, and we are very much aware that sustainability, as we have been saying during our lunch, needs to have taken into consideration the three dimensions: environmental dimension, social, and political dimension. Connectivity has played a very important role in our work. Connectivity between Europe and Asia is at the same time a threat and an opportunity. It's bringing about countries, people, and societies. It has very concrete aspects: transports, networks, digital connections, but more important than all that is also about people, people-to-people context, through education and exchanges, common knowledge, research programs, tourism, whatever brings human beings together. This is at the end our endeavor. This is at the end la raison d'être of this meeting. We'll meet in 1 year from now in Cambodia. My last word has to be to thank all the people engaged in organizing this conference. You cannot believe how many people has to work in order to make it possible. From the kitchen to the transportation, from translators to the people who strive to reach a common agreement on a text, to all of them, from the most humble activity to the highest intellectual level of all people engaged. Thank you very much. Nice back travel home.
Thank you. Thank you, Josep. And I suppose I should start by congratulating you on your new appointment in the EU. And with that, we are honored that one of your first tasks was to chair this meeting. As I have said at our earlier sessions, ASEM has grown by leaps and bounds in the last 23 years. Started off with around 26 members, we're now at 53. And as you have just outlined just now, more than 60% of the global population, of trade, and of GDP is accounted for by Asia and by Europe. I would also make the point that now, even more than before, the raison d'etre of ASEM is even more salient. This is a time of great change, a time when there's a pushback against globalization, against free trade, against economic integration. There's a profound anxiety in the middle class of many societies all over the world. And we need to double down on free trade, on integration, on investments, on economic interdependence. And the fact that the EU, and I speak now on behalf of my Asian colleagues, have been able to make a statement and to converge our minds on the cause of free trade is worth highlighting. In the case of a tiny city-state like Singapore, we are gratified that the EU-Singapore Free Trade Agreement came into force on the 21st of November, this, in fact, just last month. And we're also looking forward that this is just the first step of what will hopefully ultimately be a free trade agreement between the EU and ASEAN. If you look at this historically, the European Union, in my opinion, is the most successful regional organization in the world. Europe, a continent which generated 2 world wars in the last century, because of the EU, has now made war unthinkable in Western Europe. No matter what travails you go through, I think every European should be grateful and should count your blessings that you have secured the peace. But having said that, I've also outlined in my previous intervention that in fact Europe has a head start in Asia. The history, and of course history sometimes has both positive and negative aspects, but that legacy of goodwill, that reservoir of trust, culture and technology is there waiting to be harvested. And we know that in the last couple of decades, and especially the last 4 decades, Asia has been the locus of tremendous economic growth. And if you look within Southeast Asia alone, we have 640 million people, the majority of whom are below the age of 35. There's a demographic and technological dividend waiting to be harvested. And my point is that as a long-time partner, the EU is welcome to participate in this growth story. So the fact that we were able to have an excellent meeting, frank, candid exchange of minds, and that we reaffirmed our belief in free trade, on cooperating on issues like cybersecurity, climate change, all this augurs well for the future. So again, let me thank you and thank Spain and thank all the staff who have been working furiously behind the scenes to create such a seamless and successful meeting. Thank you, Josep. Congratulations.
I will now open the floor for your question. Please introduce yourself and the media you're working for.
Good afternoon. I work for Spanish news agency Europa Press. Sorry for my voice because I have a bad cold today. I would like to ask you first if there was any talk about the situation in Hong Kong in the meeting. Secondly, you spoke of a possibility of a free trade agreement between Europe and Asia. I thought I understood that. Do you see the possibility of a trade agreement between all the countries in ASEM, or what are we talking about here? And lastly, if I may ask a question to the High Representative concerning the new commission of which you are part, I was wondering...
What?
¿Puedo plantear la pregunta en castellano? Querría...
Give me one que se pueda oír porque no se oye nada.
No sé, es que hay mucho eco probablemente. Querría preguntarle sobre un posible proyecto de la nueva Comisión Europea de la que se ha hablado en algún momento. Hoy hemos visto en Bruselas como un tribunal belga ha vuelto a retrasar una vista judicial respecto a una persona reclamada por tres personas reclamadas por una euroorden en España. Me gustaría preguntarle si la nueva Comisión tiene entre sus planes reformar la orden europea de detención y entrega para intentar evitar que en el futuro sucedan estas cosas de desconfianza entre Estados. Gracias.
Would you like to answer first, or? Well, maybe let me start off by dealing with the question of trade, and I will focus first on Southeast Asia. ASEAN is an association with 10 member states, all of us in Southeast Asia. For us, we believe that free trade, properly negotiated and rigorously implemented, is an avenue to generate opportunities for our people. So first, within ASEAN itself, we have an economic community. And we're trying to create a single production zone, a single investment destination within the 10 countries of Southeast Asia. Beyond that, we meaning ASEAN, has free trade agreements with 6 major partners. The major partners are India, China, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. In fact, right now, we have substantially concluded an agreement which we call the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. This includes, therefore, the 16 countries that I have enumerated. If we succeed in finalizing this will be the world's biggest free trade agreement. In addition to this, some of us in Southeast Asia are also members of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. In fact, the Trans-Pacific Partnership started off as an agreement amongst 4 small states: Singapore, Brunei, Chile, and New Zealand. Later on, the bigger states got involved. Well, I think you all know the United States pulled out of the TPP, but nevertheless, with Japan's leadership, 11 of us managed to get together to sign it. We added 2 adjectives to it: comprehensive and progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership. And to our surprise, we've even been able to bring that into force at the end of the previous year. Now, from Singapore's perspective, having settled a free trade agreement with EU, we think the next logical step is to consider a 2-region, Europe on one hand, Southeast Asia on the other hand. This will not be easy. It will be difficult because of the sheer numbers and diversity of the economies concerned. But nevertheless, if we can do it, this will be a statement of intent, a statement of reaffirmation of the importance of free trade as a strategy for economic development. So that's what we are looking forward to. I'm not at all saying this will be easy or that this will happen quickly, but I think this is an ambitious goal worth going for. Now, having said that, I also need to make this point that I think in the past, too many people have assumed that free trade on its own is an unadulterated good. And the truth is, free trade has both winners and losers. And it is the responsibility of every national negotiator to carefully negotiate the terms so that there is a net benefit for the citizens of that country. And equally important, that there must be domestic legislation and domestic policy to provide sufficient safety nets for those who might be, at least temporarily, adversely affected by free trade. So this requires both foreign and domestic policy to work in concert. But we believe the EU is a worthy partner for us to work through these difficult political challenges, because ultimately, this is a question of politics. So it is an ambitious goal, but I'm going to leave it in the hands of my good friend, Josep, and we'll see where this leads to. Don't know whether you want to disagree or add to that.
I'm not disagreeing at all. By the contrary, I thank for your enlightening and inspiring words. You should come more often to Europe and explain these kind of things, because you do it very, very well, much better than much of the European politicians.
Sometimes you need an outsider to tell you what a good thing you have.
That's true. When people look at you from outside, they have a certain perspective, no? And you are very much right. Trade is everything in life. It's a good side and not such a good side. Trade, as any human activity, produces winners and losers. And even if the net balance is positive, we have to take into account the losers. And maybe we were not aware that the number of losers were so big. And what's happening today in the world, in many countries, is a little bit the backlash of globalization. The fact that the losers of globalization are now in a big number in order to make their interests and their worries very much in the political landscape. And this comes from Latin America to the streets of Paris and everywhere. But at the same time, I think that we have to continue opening our economies in order to look for a global optimum. I use this opportunity to regret that the World Trade Organization has become unoperational due to the lack of cooperation of the United States that has made that the judges are not in number enough in order to operate. And I think that a set of bilateral agreements, uncoordinated bilateral agreements, brings us to a suboptimal situation with respect to what would be an overall agreement. This is almost mathematics, no? A set of bilateral agreements not taking into account what's happening with the other altogether, it's suboptimal with respect to an overall agreement that unhappily is far out of reach on those days. But Asia and Europe has a common future to build.
Absolutely.
We are complementary.
Yes.
And when you see how important for our jobs, the exports to China, and how important it is for you prosperity, our imports, the investment, all issues that make us partners, like it or not. So we have to continue working together, because the humankind will be very much unbalanced without a good understanding between Europe and Asia.
Absolutely.
And about the other issue, acerca de la otra cuestión, yo creo que también aquí hay que hacer pedagogía y explicar que de lo que se trata es de una relación no entre gobiernos, sino entre poderes judiciales, que no son los ministros del interior de cada país los que piden extradiciones a su colega, sino que son los jueces de un país los que le piden a sus colegas de otro país. Estamos construyendo un espacio jurídico europeo, supranacional. Y eso no se va a hacer de la noche a la mañana, porque hay que crear un common trust, una confianza mutua, de manera que el juez del país A atienda la petición del juez del país B en el convencimiento de que la persona requerida recibirá el mismo trato que hubiera recibido en el país A. Y eso choca, como es lógico, con las prácticas, las culturas, las historias que cada país tiene con los demás. Naturalmente, se puede mejorar y se debe mejorar. Y debe, en mi opinión, haber más cooperación entre las instancias judiciales de un país y de otro. ¿Se puede revisar la euroorden? Pues, mire usted, no soy un especialista ni es mi tarea fundamental como alto representante, pero si puedo emitir una opinión, pues sí, creo que sí. Claro que se puede mejorar. Se puede mejorar sobre todo a través de mecanismos que creen confianza mutua entre los poderes judiciales de un país y otro, que los jueces hablen más entre ellos, que si alguien tiene una duda la pregunte y la esclarezca. Pero bueno, hay cosas que no son de hoy, son de ayer. En Bélgica, las autoridades judiciales de Flandes todavía no han tenido a bien hacer caso a una orden europea de una conocida etarra a la que se le reclaman delitos de sangre y que sigue estando en Bélgica tranquilamente porque los jueces no han considerado oportuno que esa persona sea juzgada en España. Si eso ocurre desde hace años, no nos debe extrañar que ocurran otras cosas. Pero todo se basa en la necesidad de crear los mismos mecanismos que existen en el interior del sistema judicial de cada país, extrapolados a nivel europeo. Y en eso estamos, la tarea será larga, pero cualquiera que sean los accidentes de recorrido, creo que es bueno intentar no volver atrás y que volvamos a la época en la que las extradiciones se resolvían a través de contactos personales entre los ministros de Interior de cada país. Es mucho mejor dejarlo eso en manos de los jueces de un país con los de otro. Solo así se podrá construir un espacio judicial europeo.
Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Rafael Cañas from the Spanish news agency ASEM. A question for High Representative Borrell, please. After the meeting you had yesterday evening with Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, and his reply to you, do you think that in your current position you can engage in an effective way the Chinese government in issues like democracy in Hong Kong or human rights in Xinjiang without being rejected as someone interfering in China's internal affairs? Thank you.
Well, when we talk about human rights, you have to do it with full respect to the countries in which we are, with whom we are dealing with. I have an extraordinarily good relation with the Foreign Affairs Minister of China since I met him 1.5 years ago in New York. I don't see any inconvenience. We have been talking about the subjects you refer to, and we will continue doing it in the best approach in order to express the big concerns that we Europeans have about human rights all over the world, the specific situation of each country, taking into account the characteristic of each one of them, and with full respect. It's clear that when you deal with these kinds of things, you are entering in domestic issues. But human rights is not a domestic issue. Human rights is a universal issue.
Good afternoon. My name is Nadia Chachia, and I am here on behalf, thanks to the Asia Europe Foundation, because they have invited me to attend the 12th version of the journalist seminar here in Madrid. we were able to discuss the different perspectives together and do capacity building and knowledge sharing for immediate trust, and sharing knowledge about how we can combat disinformation, and bringing that together between our Asian and European counterparts, and sharing this knowledge was incredibly valuable. And thanks to them, we were able to attend the press briefing here today. So thank you for having us here. My question is as follows. Under your theme of inclusion, I was wondering whether or not you have discussed, or whether you will put on the agenda, the point of structured dialogues that the youth presented during the Model ASEM presentation of the points that they made in their chair statement. Thank you.
It's a question for me or for Josep?
For both. I think it's for both of us.
Well, first of all, I'm glad that we had a model youth dialogue. I had the opportunity to spend some time with the 3 Singaporeans, so obviously I have a slightly biased perspective. We believe it's very important to get young people involved, because after all, the young people have the largest stake in the future. And when you talk to the young people, in particular those in Singapore, their number one concern is jobs, meaning where are the new jobs being created? What skills do they need? And are our respective education systems providing them with the necessary skills, not for yesterday's jobs, but for tomorrow's jobs? Further, another concern for people who are not so young is that we are now living in an age when I think most of us will have 2 or 3 or more jobs in our lifetime. And the old model, where university is or a technical school is something you attended before you started work, I think that's an industrial age model, and that will have to end. And in fact, in Singapore, we're looking at what we call skills future, which means you are taking adults, middle-aged people, or even people who are not so young, and giving them a chance to learn and pick up new skills so that they're ready for the next job. And we're focused on providing the educational infrastructure. We're focused on empowering our unions, because after all, your current employer is not necessarily most interested in your next job, but your union will be, because the union wants to keep you as a member for life. Beyond that, it's also very important for us to understand that governments do not have all the answers. And if you talk about the industry transformation that's occurring in societies, in fact, it is the businesses, it is the private sector that is closer to the ground, closer to the challenges, and knows what's relevant, what's useful, what to pursue. So it's very important for governments to get the right model of the working relationship with the private sector, because we have to focus on restructuring our economies. So from my perspective, these are the key issues which young people are concerned with. Jobs, a sense of hope for the future, and then also, equally important, a sense of participation and a sense of ownership. If we can provide these key elements to our young people, whether they are in Europe or in Asia, I think we'll have a very bright future ahead of us.
Well, I think I'm continuing inviting you to come to Europe. It's difficult to add something to these very inspiring words. That's true. We have been listening to several young people in our plenary meeting today, and we will take into account your contribution. I think the fact that some young people from Europe and from Asia has been invited to come to Madrid and to participate at that meeting shows a clear message about how this union projects into the future. And my co-president is very much right. The important thing for the new generations is which place they are going to have on the productivity on the industrial, on the services economy that is coming, and is coming from Asia. The new waves of innovation are coming from Asia. If Mr. Watt, you know Watt, the guy, the British who invented the steam machine, if Mr. Watt had been a Chinese, the world would have been completely different.
Yes.
But he was a British. And now, the Mr. Watt of the future, they have a strong probability of not being European, but being from Asia. The new waves of innovation are coming from Asia, and this will alter the economic structure, productivity, and jobs. That's why we should be more together in order not to create a big divide, as it happened in the past revolution, among the ones who has the technology and imposes their power to the others that doesn't have this technology. We have to share the technological development in order to create a more harmonious world than the one that we inherited from the first industrial revolution.
Hi, I'm Zunara from the Star Media Group from Malaysia. Mr. Vivian,
my neighbor.
Yes. Mr. Vivian, this is a question for you. Recently, there's been ongoing reports of plastics or rubbish being dumped from developed countries to developing countries. And as you speak on behalf of Asian countries, has this topic been discussed, and what kind of solutions are you looking forward to it? And of course, on the sidelines, if there's anything, any kind of updates that you've spoken to the Malaysian counterparts. Thank you.
Well, the issue of pollution due to plastics and microplastics, especially into the marine environment, was brought up by several speakers at our session. So this is a clear and present danger. And I think all of us are acutely aware of this. I'm also aware that there have been some cases of contaminated plastics being transported, to my surprise, across large oceans to other countries where they're supposed to undergo recycling. I think it is important for us to realize first there are international conventions for dealing with the export or import of hazardous materials. And it is important for all of us to comply with those conventions. The second point is to emphasize transparency. And when we detect something, to exchange information with all the states in that supply chain or in that logistics chain. And I can tell you from experience that this indeed is happening. The third point is to make sure that the businesses are held accountable for their outcome. You know, I speak as a former environment minister. A lot of problems in the environment occur because the externalities that are imposed are socialized on the rest of us and on the environment, and not on the people privatizing the gains. And we need to work towards a world where every body and every private corporation is held accountable for the externalities that are caused by their activities. And this can only be done if we collaborate across borders. And that's why I still believe in multilateralism. I still believe in international law. I still believe in healthy cooperation between states. That's the only way you're going to resolve this problem.
Well, I am also a former environment minister. Mrs. Merkel also is a former environment minister.
That's true.
I completely agree with you. I think next meeting in Cambodia, multilateralism is good, but sometimes it can be a little bit boring. Because when you ask 53 people around the table and each one of you have 3 minutes, it takes long, and in 3 minutes you cannot cover everything, and at the end there is some general statements without going deeper into the subject you raise. Maybe you have to select 3 or 4, 5 deep issues in order to concentrate on that. And one after the other, not everybody has to talk about everything. But we would have been more productive today. Let's do a little bit of criticism, auto-criticism. If we had been focusing more on several issues which are hot issues, in order to deliver some, I wouldn't say agreement, but at least some common understanding of where the problems are and which could be the solution. Because the humankind today is facing more than ever the problem of externalities. Prices don't send the good economic signal because they don't take into account effects which are as much as important as the price itself. And today people are taking awareness of that. And this is going to be a big revolution. When the European Union, we decided last week that we will be carbon neutral in 2050, we are opening the door to a big geopolitical turmoil, because this is going to change the distribution of wealth and power in the world. And it's creating, once again, losers and winners. And countries who today are very rich, maybe they will not be so rich, and countries who are very poor, maybe they will have an opportunity because they will be able to produce things in order to build batteries, electric batteries, that will be the engines of the future. So we are opening the door to an unknown future will require a lot of cooperation. This is the magic word. We can solve the problems through cooperation or through confrontation. And the ASEM is a good tool to go on the way of cooperation.
Yes.
Thank you. I don't see... Yes, please, one last question.
Another young man.
Hello, everyone. My name is Akhil Ranjan. I come from India, and I'm also, as my colleague mentioned, as one of the participants in journalist seminar. So I thank Asif and ASEM for bringing together young media professionals across from different countries, from both these continents. My question is, I was going through the chair's statement, and I was also listening to the various ministers talking about the numerous geopolitical issues in both the continent. But I didn't find anything, I mean, here is mention of European Union, here is prominently mention of ASEAN, but there is no mention of SAARC. And I think SAARC, the South Asian Regional Corporation. I think here are the ministers from India, representatives from India, as well as for Pakistan and other South Asian countries. So my question is, was there a concern raised on the issue? And is there any way to go ahead? Because given the, as per my understanding, I think given the fragile geopolitical situation in the region, I think a cooperation body like SAARC is a need of the time.
You know more than I about it.
Well, the first thing I want to say is that ASEM is not the United Nations. This is a voluntary membership, and obviously not all members of Asia and Europe are necessarily signed on to it yet. Although, as I said, at 53, it's a good and healthy number. Next point I would make is that, in fact, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh was represented and spoke, and we had a, how do I put it? Entertaining would not be a fair description, but we had we heard a lively exchange of views between India and Pakistan, and similarly between Myanmar and Bangladesh. So there was good participation, and their issues were heard, and I think you will agree it was a very candid exchange. So don't worry, the issues, concerns were raised, to quote my colleague from Pakistan.
Thank you. I'm afraid that's all we have time for. Unless High Representative Okay, thank you.
We continue like this. We are going to convert this press conference in another session of the meeting of the ASEM. So I think it has been very interesting questions. Thank you for giving the opportunity of sharing point of views. I really appreciated your way of dealing with the issues that worry us. And it's a big pleasure to meet you. I hope we continue.
And we look forward to welcoming you in Asia.
I will. I will have to engage deeply in Asia for sure.
Thank you.
Asia is the future of Europe. Thank you.
Thank you.